Oftentimes when we're talking about children struggling, it's really much more about the parents' struggle, and it's their own stuff. Children are parents' trophies, and children are very much reflective in people's minds of themselves and their own capacities. So oftentimes we have to differentiate between that which is in fact a child's issue versus the fact that a child may not be meeting the specific expectations and standards that the parent had set forth for them.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Second Opinion Podcast. I'm your host, Yossi Ben-Shushan, and today we are having our much-awaited guest, Dr. Samuel D. Mandelman. Dr. Mandelman is founder of the Clinic. He's also a graduate of Yale, in case you need it. And if I were to go for more of his list, it just goes on and on and on. Dr. Mandelman is at the forefront of being able to destigmatize, change, and apply growth to our children and families. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Now, Dr. Mandelman. Hey guys, we're going to get you right back to today's episode, but first, I want to speak about our sponsor, Rite Care. Now, if this is your first time hearing about Rite Care, I'm honestly jealous. You will not forget about the first time you heard about Rite Care, and you most definitely will not forget about the first time you used them. Picture this. You or your kid wakes up with a fever, sore throat, anything. You're just feeling off. The last thing you want to do is sit in traffic, make your appointments, go make sure you're at your appointment on time, not late. You're surrounded by all the other sick people who are just going to be getting you sicker, and then you have to wait for the doctor to be ready. Hopefully no one's running late. Your other kid's going to be picked up from carpool. Your phone's ringing. You had work. That's where RiteCare comes in. RiteCare sends a trained medical assistant straight to your home. They connect with a licensed provider while they are by you over video. They run all the necessary tests. They show up with their entire bag. We're going to go into it one time. They run all the tests that a regular doctor's office would be running. And they help to figure out what's going on with you. Most importantly, what you can do about it without leaving the comfort of your own home. They have service locations across New York, New Jersey. They offer the same day appointment, and they're open early mornings, late at night. It's a real life schedule that they're taking into account. They take all insurances and copays and are the same as a regular primary care visit. This is the same exact thing as going to a regular doctor. RiteCare partners with trusted medical centers, KMED Health, Ezra Medical Center. So if you or one of your kids need RiteCare, you can call, text, WhatsApp, or just book it online. And a friendly Heimish medical assistant can be at your door within hours. Do yourself a favor, guys. Save the time, save the number, and most importantly, give them a call when you need. 732-292-5665. That's 732-292-5665. Because the next time someone in your house isn't feeling well, you'll be really glad you did. And now, back to our episode. And welcome back. Today we are sitting with Dr. Mandelman, a much awaited guest. Dr. Mandelman, how are you?
Wonderful, and yourself?
Baruch Hashem. See, that's a professional. He asked me how I'm doing also. It's interesting to me personally because my original background, I think I've changed things like a million times along the way, but my original background in working with people was in crisis intervention and addiction crisis intervention. And just walking into the crisis, I was referring them on, but like just to settle whatever was going on, I didn't want anyone's opinions of anything, so I would always be there looking like a construction worker, like, a hat on, a t-shirt. And the question being, I never thought of it as even a question. I just did it. Did it ever come up as a question of, should I at least try to pretend like maybe not pay us, like maybe.
So I went through Columbia, Yale, and Cornell looking like this.
Wow.
And,
if they were going to accept it.
If others going to be walking around with purple hair, I can do payas. And taking off my yarmulke wouldn't really help changing anything. And it's always been obviously something that sticks out. But never gave it any level of consideration to adjust it in order to be able to better conform to whatever this specific situation or setting was, and has served me well.
Yeah, I mean, what would it say about you in your profession if you were trying to conform for your
Yeah,
profession?
conformity in general isn't something that I care all that much
Yeah.
about,
Oh, come on,
and
me too.
particularly. No, but when you're talking about like crisis situations, things like that, you really have to be always at your best, and has never really become a point
Yeah.
of contention in that process.
Okay, so let's jump in. We have so much to talk about, but let's start with where we're at right now. You direct the clinic.
Correct.
What specific demographic of people are coming?
So, demographic is very wide. So, the clinic is a multi-specialty practice that really has all specialties that are related all under one roof. It's very much modeled after Yale Child Study Center and Cornell Psychiatry Specialty, which is where I trained. And we have under one roof, we have diagnostics, we have neuropsychology, we have speech and language, we have psychotherapy, we have medication management, we have academic skills coaching, and social skills. So really, our demographic is 6 to death. We see anything from somebody in the throes of a psychotic episode to a kid with a learning disability, ADHD, anxiety, and we really run the gamut in terms of the variety of the cases that we see, as well as the diversity of the population, both in terms of age as well as presentation and background. So we have we're pretty broad in terms of that.
So personally, I've also done a lot of work with C.L.I.N.I.C and the like, and in crisis management or crisis intervention, it comes up a lot. I was curious about what your ideas would be. Like, there are issues, things going on for a person that they'll show up to a clinic, and then there are the ones that you're responding to in a way. What do you feel is an issue that people are not taking seriously enough?
Really, that's all of those are generally really dependent on the acuity of the situation that wouldn't be appropriate for an outpatient mental health practice. And that's all generally we look at it in two different ways. We look at a behavioral deviation. So there's behavioral emergencies, which would be any departure from the social norm, depending on the specific context that the person finds themselves in. And then beyond that is when it's more of a psychiatric emergency, which is when a person is a threat to themselves or to other, and don't necessarily have the level of volitional control that we would traditionally see. And when it reaches that point, obviously there needs to be a level of immediate intervention to ensure everyone's safety. Anything before that point, even on earlier stages of a manic episode or a psychotic episode, generally those can be managed appropriately outpatient if they are aggressively enough treated. But a lot of what we see is medication noncompliance. A lot of what we see is behavioral. A lot of what we see is, self-harm. And obviously, given how complicated it is to differentiate between the exact level of risk each situation poses, we always want people to err on the side of caution. Where it doesn't matter, we're willing to go out anytime, day or night, regardless of any other condition, to make sure that we're getting them that which they need, and really being able to get them to a point where their safety is insured, and we can really have the level of confidence that they're going to be able to move forward from that point.
Right. Our average listener is not falling into extreme categories. I'm assuming. I'm sure there are those that either know someone is or who themselves might have been, but for the vast majority of them, I feel like a lot of behavioral health, especially in our communities, is based around children. Kids who aren't performing well in school, kids who aren't performing well in general, But there is a lot of confusion about what, when, how. But within kids, developmentally, what are we looking for in a kid?
So really, my background is my first PhD is in educational psychology, developmental psychology.
I love how casually you say certain things.
And
My first one.
And the reason for that is if we do not understand typical or normative development, our ability to understand and be able to address any deviation thereof, anything that we would look at as atypical in terms of that, or what we would call developmental psychopathology, we are not going to be able to appropriately intervene at the critical juncture developmentally to be able to get those cascading effects in terms of intervention. And what we will see is oftentimes people will let it sit for too long, and by the time they come to address it, there is an enormous amount of remediation that needs to be done, and at that point there are collateral damage. I'm saying the collateral damage can be not only in terms of their academic setting and standing, but rather even in terms of their social standing, because at some point within the academic process, one's academic performance becomes a social currency. Beyond that, their own perception of themselves suffers very significantly. And when somebody is lacking an appropriate self-concept, their ability to maintain their level of engagement within an educational environment that isn't providing for them what it is that they need is going to start to waver. And once that wavering happens, then we get into all of the other areas. And what we really look at it is in terms of a risk and protective model. So we look at risk factors, we look at protective factors, and we want to make sure that their protective factors are in place to help mitigate that risk in order to make sure that we're not going to end up with significant level of fallout.
So would that be to say that earlier the better?
Earlier the better in terms of the identification of what it is that the phenomenon is. And
or if there is.
oftentimes people will come into my office and they will be gravely concerned about something, and my response will be wait and watch, and people will come very disappointed with that. Part of the overall phenomenon, not only in our community, but in the medical community in general, is this concept of the overdiagnosis, because we have this idea that if we attach a label to it, therefore then it can be understood and it can be then treated and appropriately approached. Well, in reality, oftentimes we will run to throw that label on, and really that is premature. So yes, diagnostics and getting appropriate label is critical in terms of making sure that appropriate interventions are going to follow. However, it has to only be done when a child is of an appropriate age and the presentation is sufficiently impairing their ability to function within their environment that we would ever go in that direction and apply that label.
Right. And I can definitely understand that. I've experienced a lot of people who are a little bit, and I understand that, I'm not judging it, I can totally understand, are a little bit too desperate for that label, because especially parents, but even people within themselves, if they have the label, then a lot of times they can say, well, it's because of this. But there's a lot of shame and guilt
There's
around
always a danger of when a label becomes a license to exempt yourself from anything. And oftentimes when people are struggling with something, what they want to be able to do is figure out a mechanism by which that struggle is not going to be reflective of them or their capacity, but rather attributable to some outside force. And when it's attributable to the outside force and they feel therefore it's not as reflective on them, they're easier able to tolerate it. Well, in reality, oftentimes them searching for that label is only another mechanism of avoidance which they engage in regularly.
I mean, how would you guide someone? Because I've seen this a lot, where you're going to have someone who immediately becomes is the victim and feels as the victim, and now feels that everyone else needs to be, trauma informed or the like in order to accommodate them within their diagnosis. But in reality, the diagnosis is the beginning of the work that now needs to happen. How would you present to that person that?
So I think that a lot of it comes down to parenting. And parenting in general is one of the things that we have the greatest difficulty with. When we're looking at child
When you
development,
say we, you mean?
the field, in terms of when we look at children, their greatest protective factor as well as their greatest risk factor are the parents. And when parents are unable to offer the children what they need in terms of their attachment and in terms of them being able to be sufficiently understood, obviously we're going to go down a path that is going to be complicated for all parties involved. When it is that we can empower parents, give them appropriate skills how to be able to manage even those behaviors which are seemingly impossible and very difficult, and we give them an understanding, and we can give them enough psychoeducation as to what specifically it is that they're looking at, and instead of them becoming afraid of it, but they can understand it, then they can therefore interact with all of their children in an appropriate way, so everybody's getting what they need. And the need for them to be handled with kid gloves, or everything needs to be trauma informed secondary to the parents' trauma, right? Oftentimes when we're talking about children struggling, it's really much more about the parents' struggle, and it's their own stuff. Children are parents' trophies, and children are very much reflective in people's minds of themselves and their own capacities. So oftentimes we have to differentiate between that which is in fact a child's issue versus the fact that a child may not be meeting the specific expectations and standards that the parent had set forth for them. And when it is that a child is not living up to that level of performance or living in a specific fashion that the parents would want, that doesn't make it pathological, but the parents obviously have to contend with those negative feelings and make sure that they are not then being passed along to that child in the terms of their interactions.
I think I'm gonna sound a little bit like a broken record on some of these podcasts, because I'm very passionate about certain things, and like two of my pet peeves are I guess they combine at certain points, they bisect to be one, but and disagree with me if, obviously I don't need to tell you to, but
I will, don't you worry.
Disagree with me if you find this isn't accurate, but two things. Well, number one, just to your point, I found that I was working with teenagers for many years, or adolescent of any kind for many years, struggling with addiction or any of it. And then I'm sitting there breaking my head, like working with them, crisis calls, all these things. And then once I got over my own hero complexes, I realized that if I could just train a little bit, just work a little bit with their parents, I'm not needed anymore. I'm out of the picture, like completely not needed. And then I totally switched gears and just tried my hardest to get the parents to come before the kid. The call usually is, can you meet with my kid? When it should be, can you coach us through this? How to handle this?
So in our practice, there is a tremendous amount of focus specifically on the parents. Particularly in younger kids, their ability to articulate that, which we're going through, or being able to share their experiences is rather limited. Most kids are not particularly forthcoming, so we very much focus on making sure that not only are we educating the parents, but we're empowering them with whatever level of support that they need in terms of ongoing parenting work, which is specifically skilled. And oftentimes, given children's reluctance to engage in intervention, our intervention is actually carried out through our parenting work when we can directly access the child. So parenting in general is something of great significance in our overall thinking, and particularly when it comes to interventions on populations that we can't have direct access to, it becomes a huge difference. And even when we are working with the child indirectly in intervention, we'll also include the parents within that process, because when it is that they can have that level of intervention and that level of consistency across the board, across multiple environments, and the parents are implementing the same strategies and using the same approaches with the children, we get the greatest level of generalization.
So, which brings me to the point of where, again, feel free to disagree, but two parts. Shouldn't everyone be getting training, for lack of a better term, or education on parenting? I mean, it's one of it's the thing that's going to bring up the most amount of dead, gone, buried issues that a person has, is going to be being a parent. It's going to bring up all sorts of things, and it's going to come up the same time as you trying to deal with that kid and work with said child. So doesn't every parent to a certain degree need, just in general, how to handle certain things around your children and how to talk to them, how to deal with them, and what not to do? Is it not that everyone needs that?
So my line always is that the children are mechanech the parents, and not the other way around.
I like that.
And the children are able to bring out the parents' greatest weaknesses, and know how to unravel them in ways that nobody else possibly can. And I think that there is this concept that if one goes for parenting help, that is a demonstration of them having a level of a deficit or a weakness. But if somebody would actually reflect on it, they would understand that here you are given this organism that doesn't come with a guidebook, it doesn't come with anything to give you clear guidance and directions through that developmental process. And therefore, you're relying on intuition and previous experience. Now, oftentimes, the previous experience may have not been as ideal as one would hope for, but even I see it all the time with parents that had great childhoods, just personality, just what it is that the child is like, what their predispositions are, what level of personality, how well they align with the parents will be a major source of challenge for them, and being able to get the additional level of coaching and help and understanding is critical. And one of the things that we've seen in the community in general is that there's been a recognition of this, and then people are running to all sorts of programs that offer parenting, overall perspectives, and a tremendous need to understand here is that while many of those programs are wonderful and have great ideas in general, those are not for situations when there is a clinical implication.
Right.
And we see it as a regular trend. We'll have parents that have appointments scheduled, and then they do one of these programs, and then they cancel
they're
because now they have it all figured out, and then 2 weeks later they're asking, can I get our appointment back? And because we all want to do what's best for our kids, and being honest and reflective in terms of, are we able to bring our best selves forward? What is it that, and people are embarrassed about the fact that your kids can be triggering, I had a parent in the office.
Your kids are triggering as a general.
I had a parent in the office a few weeks ago, and they were like hemming and hawing, and they're like, yeah, my kid's annoying to me. And they were like shamed that they were willing to articulate that. And I explained to them that the sooner they're able to own that and articulate that and be able to adjust that which needs to be adjusted in order to become better aligned and better equipped to contend with the child and the specific challenges, the less they're going to feel that way. Mm-hmm. And that parenting, and again, I'm positioned just by virtue of what I do to get calls all the time, and I'm not getting calls from people that houses are dysfunctional. I'm not getting houses, it's highly functional, productive, high standing within our community, and the situation arises and they don't know how to be approaching it. And given the level of complexity that children have and the long-term implications of it, they want to be able to seek out a level of guidance in order to make sure that they're approaching in the most optimal way possible, and in order for them to be able to, understand what are the potential outcomes of going in each specific direction. And a lot of it is people who doubt themselves a tremendous amount, even if they're coming from healthy places, because of the fear of what is the potential implication of my child's life. Mm. And I think that, we have a level of expectation when it comes to mechanchim that every conversation that's had with a child is looked at as dinei nefashos. Parents oftentimes don't necessarily look at it in the same way, but really in terms of us being able to manage ourselves, us being able to understand ourselves, our own proclivities, our own tendencies in terms of the way we respond, what we get triggered by, how we deal with that, and how it is that we're able to demonstrate our own humanness towards our children becomes something that is very complicated, but really enabled to do it and understand the critical importance of that attachment, and being able to look at how those early attachments will form the blueprint for all future relationships, and understand how that attachment allows somebody to develop an identity and sense of self. And when that's lacking, we got nothing to hold on to. Mm-hmm. So we're more preoccupied with how negatively it may reflect on us, but in reality, if we understood that relationship and how it is that we're going about trying to build it, and how it is that we can correct those things that haven't gone necessarily in the way that we would have ideally wanted to, and understand that really it's an investment in the rest of your child's life, giving them that sense of identity, giving them that sense of security, giving them that understanding of how relational dynamics should work, is going to make a massive impact in the child's future.
We're going to take a quick break to discuss our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by KMED, a patient-centered medical center built on a simple belief: healthcare should feel connected, not complicated. KMED brings primary care, urgent care, pediatrics, women's health, behavioral health, any specialty really. All the services together under one roof, so patients don't have to navigate their care alone. With teams working collaboratively, patients benefit from all of their doctors. Better communication, smoother follow-up, and more thoughtful outcomes. All of these people working together creates a much more synergized and streamlined a point of care for people. What truly sets KMED apart is their whole person approach. Medical providers work closely with behavior specialists, care management, and support services to ensure care doesn't stop when the appointment ends. Rather, it continues with the patient all through every appointment, every time that they come for point of care. KMED also prioritizes access with timely appointments and care designed for real families, real people, real schedules in their real daily lives. They are deeply rooted in the community. KMED is committed not just to the treatment of all people, but to education, prevention, and long-term wellness. To learn more or experience care that feels coordinated and human, visit KMED at their Lakewood locations on Madison or River, or in Jackson, or online at kmedhealth.org. Hey guys, we're going to get you right back to the episode, but I just want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Vivit. If you ever stood in front of your vitamin cabinet and wondered, am I even taking the right thing? This happens to me all the time. I'm constantly going through my vitamins, through my supplements, and seeing, does any of this apply to me? Are you dealing with low energy, allergies, sleep issues, or just feeling not yourself? It can get confusing. For me, and a lot of people I know, and that is exactly where Vivit exists. They're not a brand pushing one product specifically. You're going to hear all over the place one green juice or one vitamin being sold. They're a vitamin concierge service. You can call, you can WhatsApp, and they're going to explain to you exactly what it is that you need to be taking for your lifestyle and your needs are. They're going to guide you through, take away all the confusion between brands, dosages, what makes sense for you to take, what you don't need to be taking. You want someone to review what's already in your cabinet, they can do that for you too. Even if you're not placing an order, just reach out. They're there to help. You'll be greeted by a super friendly team that actually listens. Their service is efficient, responsive, and easy. And they constantly run exciting specials on their platform. And when you first connect with them, you receive a very exciting welcome package filled with valuable and useful items that make the experience even better. Call, text, or WhatsApp 845-388-1599. That's 845-388-1599. Or you can visit their website at myvivit.com, and you'll be directed straight to someone who is knowledgeable and can help you. Just message them. Consider your vitamins handled. Do you find that parents are subconsciously, but for lack of a better term, giving over the raising of their children to either schools, therapists, just really anyone that'll have them?
We are constantly talking about the partnership between home and school. And that relates even past elementary school into SIFT and high school. I think parents, when they're reaching out to the school in that way, are really looking for that guidance and direction, and it's less about offloading the responsibility and more about the fact that they are perplexed and overwhelmed and don't know how to approach it, and are looking for a level of insight from those who are supposed to be experts in child education and development. And when it is really approached that there's a shared responsibility and that each party has their distinct roles that they need to be filling, and each party has distinct capacities to be able to impact the child's development, that's our best case scenario. When it is too heavily weighed in one direction or the other, and it doesn't have that true balance or that clarity of where those lines of demarcation are, that's when I think it gets complicated as to are they being overly reliant on an institution or a party, or are they not? And it really comes down to understanding the specific roles and that each party should be designated as having.
Is it worth checking in with ourselves, like as a regular thing, to check in, for parents to check in with themselves of what part of my, I had a parent call me 2 days ago, and he just said the line was just very impactful to me. He was like, I didn't realize, I don't know when that happened. He's like, but I have no idea who my kids are. Like I dropped the ball at some point. We get along, everyone's fine, no one's acting out. He's like, but I was just sitting around my table and I realized I don't know anyone here.
So I think that's not only talking about handing over the responsibility to institutions. I think in general people's lives are very busy, and it becomes largely technical and a lot of logistical relationships, as opposed to really being able to say with a level of confidence that I know my child, I know them well, and I've taken the time to understand who and what they are, what their personalities are, what their strengths are, and what their weaknesses are. And I see this all the time in the office when we're doing our clinical interview with the parents and trying to get a sense of what the child's all about. And we have parents that are looking at us blankly and can describe some very external behaviors, but not really in terms of the essence of who and what the child is. And then obviously that is indicative to us of what else is going on within that dynamic, and how that dynamic may potentially be informing whatever it is that we're seeing play out. So we obviously, time is difficult to always spend with each child and be able to give everybody what they need, but at least there should be a stated value of being able to say, I know my child best. And I will challenge parents on a regular basis. They're obviously coming in because the situation is whatever it is with their child that obviously is beyond them. But when I ask them for their own input, and I'll ask them, what is your maternal intuition like? What do you feel? And parents are taken aback by that.
No one talks about that.
All the time. And I say, I can create it for you in clinical terms, but what's your intuition? And parents oftentimes feel overwhelmed by that question because they're not used to being able to really rely on that intuition. And part of the work that we do in parenting in general is reinforcing that sense that you are capable. And even though your child may be complicated and you may feel like you have a gross level of incompetence and a failure towards your child, you are still the most vital person in their life, and you should not be second-guessing everything, obviously assuming that they are healthy and responsible, but really understanding that piece is important.
Do you find, or is it that every parent, or just about every parent of every child, that it can actually, because I think this has been just like this. We've been miyash on this, that like it could be enjoyable, that raising children could be joyful, as opposed to this roller coaster of emotion mixed with, because a lot of parents that I meet, and I fall into this category all the time, where as long as there's no damage done, like just a sigh of relief as long as there's no damage done, like, oh, we got through today. And, I don't think anyone was traumatized, and everyone's alive, and everyone, is there any tool to use? I mean, obviously that's a very broad thing to try to ask for, but a starting point to use of how can we enjoy this process?
So I think the more educated we are, the more we are able to approach it with a level of comfort. There are a few pieces I think really that need to be unpacked there. One of them is oftentimes parents are afraid of their children because they don't know how to be dealing with them. Other things are parents have enormous level of expectations on their children, given, like we said before, that the child is a reflection of them. And also parents want to be able to will their children to success and whatever constitutes success for them, and therefore there is a tremendous amount of angst in that dynamic, given the fact that parents want really what's best for the children, just don't know how to get them there. And oftentimes it's very much about external metrics of success and how it is that they are being able to keep up with those of their social circles in terms of their performance. And I think that if everyone would just take a few steps back and understand, how well do I know my child? How well am I connecting with my child? Do I enjoy my child's company? Can I honestly say, as long as my children are not killing each other while they're fighting, that I actually enjoy them and I'm able to appreciate them as people? And there's this funny dynamic that I find all the time, that people view their children as children and that don't necessarily have a personhood. That they are
children.
They're my children, they are reflections of me, they are to heed everything that I say. And I think what happens is that people lose the fact that they are your children. Yes, they are your responsibility. Yes, the child has to be respectful of you, but the objective is for that child to grow and separate and individuate. And the objective is for there to be a solid enough foundation for that child to become an independent unit, which is capable and competent of contending with whatever the necessity of those challenges may be, given the particular context. And what we want to be able to do successfully is empower our kids and give them those tools and give them that sense that you are in fact capable, you are in fact competent. We have faith in you as a human being that you will be able to contend with whatever challenges may arise. And I think we have, for a lot of ways, made our children less competent because we don't have that sense of belief, and that's not what we're cultivating necessarily, not because we don't want to, because we are so focused on many of the other things that independent value. And then we have the flip side, where children who are lacking that sufficiently supportive environment, lacking that attachment, become parentified very quickly and become adults without having that opportunity to grow up, and without that middle ground of being an autonomous being, but within a supportive and loving structure.
I feel like there is a choice, again, subconscious choice, but can't be, I guess, choice then, but a choice between protecting them and putting them into that driver's seat and giving them what they need in order to do their own, to be their own. And I feel like protecting them is like that first instinct that hits. And it's sometimes something that we have to deny a little bit in order to give them, the term you used was, forgot the term you just used, but it was basically building them up, that they can.
So I look at it as less of a choice and more about trying to strike that balance. Try in terms of obviously protecting them, but children don't do well when they're bubble wrapped.
Right.
And really, if we look at the developmental sciences in terms of how kids learn and how they develop as human beings, it's really through the interactions, through those experiences. And obviously, we're not suggesting that we should expose our children to high levels of adversity and see how it is that they do. But even within the context of their daily lives, there's enough going on, which is how much are you allowing them to problem solve on their own with your guidance. Really, you can give them input and being able to take things apart and give them a thought process as to how to go about doing something, because we want you to be able to go this on your own, and not because you can't rely on us, but because we have sufficient faith in your capacity to be able to approach it in a way that would be best. And we want to be able to foster that. And what's interesting is that our system in general is very preoccupied with how we can accelerate development as quickly as we possibly can. Everything that we do, we start at the earliest ages possible. We start alphabets, and then ABCs, and then, by the time they're in fifth grade, we're learning Gemara, and by the time they're going into ninth grade, they have to be Fartik Lamdanim. And part of that is, we have this need to accelerate it in certain ways, and in the other ways, that need to accelerate it isn't giving them the opportunity to really develop as independent units, where those opportunities for that capacity building is taken away because we are so singularly focused on how quickly we can move them forward and get them to an endpoint, as opposed to being able to allow that process to unfold.
To slightly switch lanes over here, every kid, and now even a lot of adults that are being diagnosed later on in life, seem to be going on medication. Like, it seems to be happening really fast in the process. It seems to be that, before they tried anything, they just like, let's try this, and they start medicating. Do you find that, or do you find that that's a lot of people just fear-mongering more? And
so I'll tell you, I suffer from the opposite. People and schools and institutions in general sometimes are frustrated with me that I won't jump right away to recommend medication. And I view medication as a tool to be able to put the person in a position to be able to gain the skills that they actually need, as opposed to it actually being the answer to anything. And I like to be able to exhaust many other options before resorting to medication, because oftentimes when there are shifts in the level of support or the environment around them, we are able to not necessarily have to go run to medicate. Obviously, when medication is appropriate and necessary, it can be life-altering and give them, really the greatest positioning to be successful. But I think in general, people believe that if they can achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve with a quick fix, they prefer to do that without really understanding that this is only a tool to be able to get to the next place. And when we look at the level of overdiagnosis, let's say of ADHD, the amount of times in a week a lot of people come in that were diagnosed with ADHD, been on meds, never got the level of relief that they needed from, and after doing a regular diagnostic workup, come out with the fact that it was never ADHD, and hear that they never understood why it was that everybody else that they knew took the medication and they were miraculously able to focus and attend far better, and they weren't. A lot of that comes down to the fact that oftentimes the underlying actual issue wasn't ADHD.
wow.
And so the rush to medicate out of urgency to be able to correct the issue oftentimes comes at the expense of an appropriate approach in terms of diagnostics and truly understanding what it is that's going on, what other pieces need to be in place. I'll never make a recommendation for medication alone. We'll always come along with either another intervention in terms of therapy, if it's more mental health, or some level of remediation or educational intervention when it comes in terms of more of an educationally related issue.
Yeah. I think someone I was working with one time had the best line about it. And I sort of took this as my litmus test for whether or not someone's on medication or should be on the medication or is on the right medication. He said he started taking medication, and once it built up and it was right and right dose, right everything, he said it's a fair fight now. Now it's a fair fight.
Right.
This I can do. Like, he was excited to fight. He was excited to do this work now because he knew that it's not going to be easy, but there's a possibility for him to come out the other side.
And they're positioned then to actually do that which they need to do. And all the time when, people are in therapy, and therapy isn't necessarily working as it was hoped to be, and then oftentimes then they'll become, a question about medication, and really it comes down to, and the litmus test that I always use are they able to benefit from their environment that they're currently in, or are they able to benefit from the intervention that they're getting? And in situations when it is that they're not being able to benefit from that intervention or from the environment that they find themselves in, we have to be able to do something to be able to change that. And people in general think about medication in very odd ways, and it's very harmful. And again, some people will walk in and say, I don't really care, just give me a pill and make it go away. And some will say, I will do anything in the world to avoid this. And I think a lot of that comes from misdiagnosis and then poor pharmacological management. When somebody's on medication, they should not look in any way as if they're on medication. If somebody's looking that way, or someone's personality has dramatically changed, they're on the wrong medication or the wrong doses. And a lot of what we get bad rap for is really poor medication management. It's not the medication itself. I was on a phone with a patient last week, and I said, my objective is for you to take the medication every day without it actually being part of the way that you're thinking. Right? I don't want you to have the side effects. Yeah. I just want you to be able to deal with that which you need to be dealing with without it being conscious that you're on medication, because I want it to be something that you're able to look at as a tool, given the fact that it is something that you currently are in need of, but not in something that comes along with so many other pieces that it's getting in your way from actually being able to benefit. And finding that appropriate clinician, being able to that medication management being fine-tuned enough. And oftentimes people don't give it enough time. And
it's a big. I find that to be a very big a misunderstanding that people have about medication, is giving it the right amount of time. It's a diagnosis. When you have that diagnosis, now the treatment plan, it takes time.
It takes time, and people, by the time they often get the appropriate diagnosis and then a treatment plan is drawn up for them, they're already burnt out and they're not doing it. But when it comes to medication, specifically, when we oftentimes will start with something that isn't, we want to start with the agent that is going to have the least amount of side effects, is going to be the least negative potential impact, given the fact we're always looking at it within a benefit and risk analysis. And when you're looking at it like that, sometimes you will start with an agent that isn't necessarily the ultimate agent, but it's a process. And as much as psychiatrists would like to look at themselves as scientists, pharmacology is an art and not a science. And every agent can impact the person differently based on how it is that they metabolize it. So there has to be an understanding that, as frustrating it really is a process. But once that process is given sufficient time to unfold, they can really get that level of relief that they're looking for.
We have to wrap up. Dr. Mandelman, I could talk to you all day. If there was an idea that you would be able to say now, and all parents out there or kids out there or people suffering or whatever it is you choose can know, and they'll have it, and you won't ever have to hear that conversation again, what would it be?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
I think really that parents' concern about their engagement with their child being negative versus the understanding the potential positive impact and their level of wariness of hurting their child versus understanding the benefit of being there for their child, even if it's in a less than optimal way, I think is something that is massive. We have this overall idea that everyone's walking around with endless amounts of trauma, and that everything that people do is somehow a trigger to that trauma. But instead of engaging, people shy away from that engagement, given the fear that they don't want to be harming anyone, and all they end up doing is the exact opposite. So understand that you are far better off when it is that you're approaching things in a way that is proactive as opposed to avoiding it. And you and the role that you play in your child's life can never be underestimated.
Wow, that was a good one. Dr. Mandelman, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Hope to do it again soon.
Likewise.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for watching the episode. Here at Second Opinion, we're always trying to have you be the one who makes the second opinion. I hope today's episode allowed you the information and access to that information enough to be able to decide for yourself. If you like today's episode, if it spoke to you and you want to see more, we got more. You can access our podcast on anywhere, any platform where you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is, we're on there. Video, audio, you got it. Please remember to like and subscribe. And again, thank you guys for joining us.